7 o'clock, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We do a roll call. Vandenbrink. Here. Page. Here. Schatzinger.
Here.
Gatsky.
Here.
Krieger. Here. Iverson.
Here.
And Sorensen. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okey dokey. Public comment, we have no one signed in to speak. So we have the secretary's report. Have you all reviewed the minutes of the Tuesday, December 5th meeting? Tom, do you want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, Carrie.
Wait, I think, did you say agenda? Minutes you meant.
The minutes, I'm
minutes.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
The agenda's already
For
been approved.
December 5th.
I got that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and second by, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Heather's making copies of the financial report, but in the meantime, I came in and I told you I would do an analysis of the restricted donations and donations that have not been restricted. So what's coming around is what the fund balance is in the money market account. The balance of today was $218,060.97. Of that, there are $3,345.51 that are restricted, and you can see what they're restricted for. There's $69 left of the $2,000 grant from the Webster's Fire Prevention Grant from last year, and it's fire safety, and then I never say it right, combi tool. And then the second floor, there's $2,172.50 remaining from donations. And water rescue is $302.01, and the drone operations are $252, for a total of $3,345.51. The unrestricted donations are different people, anonymous people, providing, it totals to $2,600. Annette Klein donates money, it should be $160, I did that wrong. She donates money because you put water out at the community garden, but we would do that regardless, but in her kindness, she gives a donation to the fire district for that. And we have a new donation, and this is on the agenda for you to approve tonight, is from County or Country Roads, I don't know if it's County Roads or Country Roads, UTV and ATV for $100. And then the Bry-Vogel donation, there's a balance of $45,342.14 remaining. And the Ruby Volbrecht bequeath was $5,975.24. So the total unrestricted donations are $54,117.38. So the balance of unrestricted funds in the money market as of today are $214,775, because I have to add that 60, and 46 cents. So I hope that helps answer questions. Now, the invoices have gone out for the municipal dues, and this is the money that's been left at the end of the year in the money market. So we will have a discussion on where to apply the Volbrecht gift, but we may want to talk about that in the general sense of undesignated donations going forward too. And we know we need radios, and we know we bought a fire truck, so we have some things that we'll ask command about what they see coming down the road. Are there any questions about this? Yes, sir.
You said it should be $160 someplace.
Yeah, for Annette Klein, it's
Does that change the totals at all, or a
Yeah,
little bit?
it does.
It goes up a little
The
bit?
remaining balance is $214,775.46.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that helps out. We know where part of that money's came from then. That's their donations over the years.
Well, that's what I took, a report that Barb had done previously and brought it forward so that it was easier to read, so that we could see what was restricted and what wasn't restricted, because it was just the money, and it needed to be just simplified. So I think this is on the agenda for later today, also to talk about like the Volbrecht gift. I think she's gonna come in with the financials. Because I don't know if I wanna, we can approve the donations. We received that donation we received a $100 anonymous donation, and we received $100 from the UTV ATV Club. That other $100 is in the 2,600 of anonymous people, and then the 160 from Annette Klein. So I would be happy to entertain a motion to accept those funds and send a thank you.
I'll move we accept all three.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
That's the net Klein.
Move to approve the anonymous for 100, the net Klein for 160, and the county roads UTV ATV for 100.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tom. Is there any discussion?
Thanks for putting this together, and also thank you to the individuals, organizations that have supported the fire district.
And these are new, Annette's isn't new, but the other two are new donations. So
Great.
it's cool.
Who made the motion?
I
Jonathan?
did.
Oh,
Jonathan and I think
Oh,
Tom
okay.
seconded it. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. What's not on here, and what, I'll just give you the information that we can take formal action at the next meeting, is Heather and I wrote a grant to the Webster Foundation for $1,600. And I don't know if John or Cody want to talk about what it was for. It was for those cameras, the heat camera things.
Oh, a thermal imaging camera?
Yeah, that thing.
For our fire rigs, which help, locate heat sources and bodies and stuff, so. I
And,
thought it would be a good addition. Some of ours are getting kind of old, so we want to look to update them.
And PD doesn't have any, so that they can also help PD out if PD needs to
Right.
find
Yep.
someone in a building. It helps you be more efficient in finding out where structure fires are.
Yep.
These
And-
size ups.
And if there's bodies, people in
Yep.
there.
Yep.
So it's a safety thing for you, and it's a safety thing for the public.
How are those, do you hold them or?
Yep, they're handheld.
Handheld.
Yep.
Thank you.
When will you find out? When is the?
February 14th.
Yep, February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
Yep. Yes.
We're on the budget. The financial report. So Heather put these together. It's her first attempt at doing actuals versus budget. And I guess these are the, here, those are the, that's the check register. So there is an error, which I circled when you see it. It's a $216,938 error. It's to the good, but we know we didn't receive that money. And if you remember the last meeting, Heather said, well, not Heather. Amber said that there was a transfer that they couldn't figure out where it came from or where it actually went to, and this might be the glitch. So we'll get CLA to help clean this up for us. But our state fire dues were ahead of what we had budgeted for, because we budgeted for 22 or we budgeted for 25, and actually with all 3 municipalities it will be about 30. And the fire inspection fees are lower. Interest income was really,
What does that mean, inspection fees are lower?
we budgeted 55,000 for inspection fees because we had changed the dollar amounts for inspections, but it came in at $45,605 instead of 55,000.
So that hurts our budget a little bit. then.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It's 17% under. I think we're gonna be the same, I think it's gonna be the same this year, which is why I say it's gonna take a couple years to go through the budget to know what the actual dollars are that we receive. And it's based upon what goes out on the property tax bills. And the city had always been concerned that what they were billing actually needed to be completed, as well as completed as the inspection, but also the building needed, like people need to go in the buildings and inspect. You don't walk by the building and inspect, and so the city was having issues with putting that on tax rolls, not being confident that they were completed. So I'm disappointed that it's about $9,500 less, but I think we're gonna get a better, truer accounting of things over the next couple of budgets. And I budgeted, I'm gonna be truthful, I budgeted high on it for this year based upon this, so we're gonna come in short for this year too. That's why I keep saying we need another 2 years to have some experience. Interest income is much higher. Insurance recoveries wasn't budgeted for, so we had some of that money come in. Miscellaneous revenue was $7,500, and I don't know what 1584 is, I'm not sure. We had somebody who did accounting in a different manner than we will be doing accounting. Fund balance applied, that comes.
Wait, so the budget, miscellaneous revenue, can you remind us what that, so we're waiting, this is last year's budget, so 99%. So we didn't get, explain why.
What was in the budget was $7,500. We got $15.84.
So why did we think 7,500 was going to come in?
I don't know.
Oh,
It was based, I think, on previous budgets.
and would that be donations, miscellaneous?
No idea.
I don't know. Do you know what miscellaneous revenue 10 is?
That's the general, according to Kelly at CLA, she always says number 10 is the general fund. So it's what everything goes into, is what she explained to me.
They could have been putting it somewhere else.
Yeah. But again, we need time to straighten these things out. fund balance applied, which is at the end of the, when we're doing the budget, remember we talked about fund balance applied this year, and we went with the $32,000 fund balance applied. That would theoretically come out of the $214,000 remaining in the money market account. But I'm hoping we won't need it. And donations, apparently there was nothing budgeted, and we had $33,965 in donations, but I don't know where that came from either. So, again, this is gonna take a while to.
So that answers my question, though, it's not donation, the miscellaneous, because there's another
No.
section for donations.
Correct. Interest income, again, higher than, there was no interest income budgeted for that. Donations and contributions, so that is, that seems like a real number because it's $5,050. We received $2,000 from Webster's, and we received an anonymous donation of $2,500. And then there were smaller donations in there. Some
you're-
restricted, some not.
You're matching up like your coding from the previous accounting software to the new
Yeah.
software, right?
Yeah.
So you're merging, so, I mean,
Right.
theoretically, that 7,500 in miscellaneous could have been coded previously as
Yes.
the donations, which is now coded at the 28 and calling out the 5,000, right? So I mean.
It
just a
could be,
transition.
it could be.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things that we have to work through. Fire call charges, I don't know how we can have a minus 2,800. Because we don't pay anybody to go out on a fire call. And then interest income, I'm not sure why we have interest income on 3 different lines, so we'll work to get that combined.
I'll talk with Kellyanne.
I don't mean this to sound, I'm just gonna say it, I don't mean, like, how do we not know some of these, if we're working through it? It's because we just ran it and we're just
We
looking at
don't
it
know a
now?
lot of things. We don't know a lot of things. We don't know necessarily, money was moved. Money was moved to pay, money was moved out of budget lines to pay different budget lines.
And there wasn't notes, I guess, is what you're saying.
Well, it shouldn't have been moved. If, what we're gonna do this year is run the budget, and if we go over in a budget line, y'all have to approve it, but we still have the money to pay it. So we need to see what we're actually spending in the budget lines.
We get to move it. The group gets to move it if it's a
Right,
short one.
right, but then we know, and we have it in the minutes, where that money has come from. We don't know that right now.
So maybe I sound uneducated here, but back to Jonathan's question of maybe it was coded differently and it, you know, it's not aligning up. Can't we simply look back in the old system to see how it was coded?
No,
And why?
Because it's a
because
mess.
money was moved.
It was a mess and there was no documentation.
Okay.
Money was spent from different areas and there was no documentation why or where it came from. So unless you have that documentation, you're not gonna know. That's why it's important that we discuss about this. When we move money, it's in the minutes, so going forward, it's not a big mess like it was in the past. This is gonna take some time. I fully understand that. I'm disappointed that we have to do this, but that's the way it goes.
And this is the responsibility of elected officials, is to, we are stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we are responsible. I remember when I first
Well, that's
started.
why I asked.
We first
Right.
started on the board, and you said, well, it doesn't matter. Somebody told you it doesn't matter because the bills have already been paid. It does matter.
I said it doesn't matter. Hold on here.
No, I
you
don't
said
think
someone-
that's what you
No,
said.
no,
This
you
is-
said someone told you it doesn't matter what we do because the money's been already spent.
I think if we're going back to which we should go back at that time. So to be clear on the record, I think looking at our budget, all bills matters clearly.
Oh, yeah.
And that's important, and that's why I'm interested in being on city council and on this board. I think what I had stated at that time was, if things have already been spent, someone had informed me, you're not necessarily approving it, you are voting to accept that into the record, and maybe that person was wrong, but it was just a difference in opinion, and that technically if it's been spent, you're not approving, you are just accepting it into the record.
Right, and that person was wrong. We do.
And that was a question I asked,
Yeah,
so that has no
yeah.
relevance to right now what we're talking
Yeah,
about
it
here, I don't
does.
think.
Yeah, it does, because we have to change the way we do it here. Because the board needs to be approving these expenditures. You give certain leeway to administration within the budget lines, and they can spend that. What was going on before is money was being moved that the board did not know about. Does that make sense?
Money was being moved and spent that the previous board did not know.
Right, and that was the point we were looking at after.
Right, we
And then we
discovered
were quote
that,
unquote approving it, but it was already spent.
or it wasn't in that budget line anymore.
And you'll be doing the same thing now, because you have a budget, you follow the budget, you pay for things out of the budget line. We've approved that. But what was going on before is money was being moved that we were not aware of.
The money was there.
Yeah,
It was, they were drawn out of the pot, not off of these numbers.
Right. So for the record, this is why I care, and I'm glad we're going through the budget.
and it's gonna be painful. I'm not going to lie. This
Yeah.
is gonna be difficult.
It's gonna be a mess. It really will be going forward.
And
And so,
Heather's, yeah.
go ahead, Gary, go
And
ahead.
Heather's still gonna be paying bills from Ace and those places that we're gonna approve after she paid them. Because some of those bills come in and you have to pay them. Because nothing lines up with, there was a time when business, you said, hey, our meeting is, the bill's gotta be there by like the last week of the month. Otherwise you don't get paid until, and now what they do is they just tack on a charge. Didn't, businesses have changed too. I mean, the town, we only paid them, we saw the bills before they were paid. But then it got so businesses don't really care. So they send a bill and they give you 15 days to pay it. We'd have to meet twice a month or 3 times a month. So some of those bills still are not gonna be approved before they're paid.
And the other thing is, we are no longer moving money without board approval.
Right.
I've got it.
That's what makes
That's
the
that's the difference.
Got it.
We're not gonna be moving money around without board approval. They might overspend a budget line, but then you have to approve, like you did earlier this year, taking it out of contingency. But then Heather and I were told, oh, we don't have anything in contingency anymore. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we're getting a report here that says we have this amount, and you're saying we don't. Do you see why it's so messed up? Okay.
Ellen,
Yes, sir?
quick question. So this is gonna help us, the actuals that the new system is producing is gonna help us with budgeting for next year.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, because we'll see what we're paying. Like, I anticipate, because McMahon and Associates are going to we're gonna do the strategic plan tonight, that our professional services will decrease quite a bit. We're gonna be way over budget in professional services, and Jim is here too, and he's a professional service. So we've been heavily utilizing them this year, and I expect that expenditure line to decrease dramatically. So, for expenses, Heather has done, well, the board did a change with the full-time salaries, because Heather's salary is significantly less than what the previous chief's was.
Yeah, this is 2023, so his is still, the amount budgeted is still the amount was budgeted.
Right, right. And then part-time salaries is down, because what had happened in 2022 is that we had a second full-time employee. And we were paying Wisconsin retirement for that employee, and we were carrying them on our insurance as a full-time employee, and that had never been approved. But that's one of the things we needed to look at. That's why we were over budget on wages, because we had a second full-time employee.
So you're saying that someone was promoted to full-time without board approval?
Yes,
And they're just being paid out of the part-time line item.
yes. That's why it's important we control
Yep.
the budget better.
That was confirmed when we sat down with the insurance company. John and Heather and I sat down with Drew Diedrich, and we had to go through and name the number of employees we had. He said, oh, you had 2 full-time employees. And they're like, no, we didn't. He said, well, yeah, that's what we were covering. So that's one of the reasons it's lower. And Heather, the other thing is we were budgeted for 3 people, and sometimes we had 4 and 5 people on during the day. So Heather was very good about managing how many people were here during the day, and we didn't have a second full-time employee. You see, we do have overtime, and that's Heather. I did authorize that because she's been doing a huge amount of work to administratively get this district where we need to be over the last year. We owe her a great thanks for that. Social Security, we're okay. Retirement, we're lower because.
Ellen, I got a
Yes,
quick
sir.
question. It's quite possible then, at the end of the year, though, some of these numbers aren't not gonna work out because we're under what we need, but some of these are gonna be way over, like the part-time salaries and stuff, so we're probably gonna be okay by the end of the year, maybe.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay.
I think we will too. I'm
Um,
just noticing that, I'm just,
So, retirement, well, that was down a lot because we didn't have all those full-time employees. And then, professional services, you can see that we are at 300% of our professional services budget, and that's because of McMahon and Associates and Jim Macy. And we did use Tom Moniz for the Ruby Ballbrecht
right.
a gift also. Utility services, that had been under budgeted. Repair and maintenance, we're up on repair and maintenance for the building. We are up on, you can see we spent $23,000 and the budget was $2,000. Training services, the budget was $8,400, we spent $860. Office supplies, publications is about $293, the budget was $36. So what we, travel was $4,000 and the budget was $2,000. I'm not, do we have,
Travel?
that's not right, we're gonna have to, I'm gonna circle that one, because I don't think we traveled.
I didn't travel, I didn't know. I
Okay.
didn't put anything in travel.
And again, I think, Jonathan, you're right, that's a coding issue.
For the publication due subscription, because it's such a significant difference from what was budget, is there something we think we're missing on?
No,
Do you know where that money went to in previous years? Like last year?
no.
Okay, I kind of thought that.
It's, I don't want to.
We don't need to go any further.
Yeah. Insurance was budgeted at $33,000 and it was $28,000. And I think we'll still be good with insurance for this year. We had some problems with looking at the cycle of payment for that, but I think we're okay. Contingency, the budget was $1,650 and we did blow through that.
I know we used some of it.
Yeah.
But that's what she had moved it out of,
Okay.
but that was another question when I printed it out today, that didn't make
Okay.
sense to me.
And equipment 10, 28,000. I think that the auditors said it was 32,000 when they were here last. So I'll circle that one too.
What is equipment, 10?
I think that that's our equipment fund that Gary's always so concerned about, where we're supposed to swipe any, like if we have any operating funds left, it's supposed to go in there.
Oh,
And I
is that
think-
that fund?
I think Heather in the audit reported it was 32,000 last month, so we'll
Okay.
have to check on that one
I think, did you skip over firefighter fund?
too. Yeah, I did. Firefighter fund, 65. $104,000. What is the firefighter fund?
It's the, if they've been in the department 10 years, you get $100 per year they've been
Oh,
on.
that's right, that's
So
right.
we paid,
So we didn't pay out, we paid Zabel,
Yeah.
Deputy Chief Zabel.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only
That's the
payout
one
we
that
had.
retired. Yep, that had the 10 years.
So it's a little clunky, but it's a first shot. And we're still working on cleaning up some things from when the city was running payroll for us, when we did the cutover. They ran August and September for us.
They ran September.
September.
Barb ran on.
Okay, and then we ran October.
Yes.
Okay, so we're still cleaning up some of the monies that are owed both the federal and state government for taxes, but it's not a lot, it's just a couple $100. Are there any other questions, anything else you need us to look at to work on correcting? You can always email me, not you.
Yeah, that's right, Gary doesn't believe in the internet.
Don't need
Just
it.
call me. And then we can look at, I'm not gonna ask you to approve it because we know it's not right, but it's close.
We're not paying for the postage, Gary.
And then the bills and applied payments, if you have any questions about those.
I like seeing what we're paying for.
Yes, Doug?
Brief question on the fire extinguisher sales and service. What exactly did they did? Did we replace those ones that were missing? Or not yet? These are
No,
just
I
service?
don't know if, Chief, do you plan on replacing those 7 that are missing?
I thought he replaced them already, to be
No,
honest.
he took the ones that had been serviced in so many years and recharged 3 out of the 6. And so there's 3 that are charged and ready to go, and there's 3 that we can charge if we want, but it costs a lot of money to have them charged because of the type of.
And this was
extinguisher
trying to
they are.
stay within budget.
Yeah, and, but we have enough on auto brakes right now that
Right.
we're good, so.
Wait, we have 7 that are missing? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, we said that last time. They just disappeared. Who knows where they're at?
Any other questions?
Well, to answer Doug's question, what that was paid for was the annual maintenance. So
They
to have them
hadn't
come in,
been-
check them,
yeah.
and then.
They hadn't been maintained.
Right,
They've
that's-
been checked.
Well, they've been most of them have, some of them were maintained, some were not. So we've got all of them up,
I'm sure some had to be hydro tested again and all that good stuff. Yeah.
so.
Is there any other stuff that needs to be done with the extinguishers that we currently have? Are they all
I think you're
up?
okay
No,
now.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
okay.
Yeah, we're up.
we told him to do whatever he needed to do to get us up to
Okay,
where we needed to be.
I appreciate that.
I have to go back in the notes. I don't know if I saw that from the minutes. Was that about where is that in the minutes about the extinguishers?
I'm not sure I put it
I
in
don't
there.
know that that's in the minutes. Did we talk about that last month?
Yeah, I don't know if it was last month or the month
I
before.
don't remember.
I don't think
He
we
didn't-
talked
he didn't
about
come
it
in
last
until
month.
December.
Right, that's when we noticed it.
Yeah. He didn't come in until
Maybe we didn't
December.
talk about it, I just heard about it.
And I don't know when they went missing, but if something went missing now, I mean, we have installed cameras, so theoretically we could check cameras.
Right,
Well, we also
Definitely.
have an inventory too.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
we have no
But
idea
they're
when
not-
they
were-
disappeared.
yeah,
Thing is,
they
they
were-
could take it out on an
Maybe
accident,
they should.
Good
and
point.
the darn thing could be in the ditch.
Good
I mean,
point.
If we don't have them.
You know, somebody just forgot to pick it up, or somebody
I
using
see.
it, had to get in there and laid it down. I
Going
mean,
forward.
That's a good
Yes,
point.
going forward,
It
they
might
are
not be
in
stolen, is what you're
right,
saying.
it's,
Or it got ran over and somebody threw it away.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's good
Yeah,
to
we
don't
understand.
We
that.
We don't know where they went. They
I
just-
see.
I don't think we should
Compared to
assume that
what-
somebody came in and stole it.
Okay, I'm glad to
Right.
hear that. Okay, good.
Exactly.
I guess I'm more concerned that no one checked and kept track of those
Heather
extinguishers.
says that going forward, they're in inventory now.
Right.
And they will be, because you all have been working on inventory.
You know, we didn't really have a good inventory before. And, you know, and it's hard work doing that. And you get tear
Oh,
the
yeah.
trucks apart and, you know, as long as there's a fire extinguisher when somebody needed one, who cares? I mean, I'm not on the department, but I've worked enough, I know that that's how these things go.
Are there any other questions about the check register?
No.
Okay, I would take a motion to accept the bills and applied payments.
I'll make a motion to accept the bills
Thank
and make
you.
the payment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there any further discussion? You can see we're not cutting a lot of checks, which is okay.
Can I, quick question, sorry, I didn't ask before. Webster's, we put food here for team building.
Mhm.
Quick Trip, like for the ones, for what we just didn't write.
Quick Trip is our normal, our
Fuel.
monthly gas bill,
Sure.
fuel bill.
That's
Yeah.
fuel,
And the team building was the axe throwing that you did in December?
Yep, after our shop with emergency personnel.
Okay. And that was well received?
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Okay, if there are no more questions, I would entertain a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, now we're going to move on to our special order of business, the 5-year strategic plan.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's some revisions in this based on
Some minor changes.
some input from the board.
Kevin's gonna be the Vanna White.
Oh.
Would be the button push.
Change the slides.
Better than the other one was.
You want that? It doesn't work, so I guess
Maybe
you
it's
use this,
fluffier
you use this
because-
keypad.
And add, appendix.
This one worked the other day, but this is disappointing.
The last one.
Yeah, that works, but not the, yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
let's rock and roll.
as I think most of you, if not all are aware, we started about a year ago talking about helping you as a department and a district build a strategic plan for the future. And as with anything in life, things change, and that's one thing I want to remind everyone, that this document is ever-changing. A strategic plan should never be, hey, that's what we agreed to, we're going to do it for 5 years, we're not going to deviate, because conditions always change. Whether that's, you had a pandemic in 2020, that changed things. So if you had if you adopted a strategic plan in 2019, probably in 2020, a lot of people looked at strategic plans and said, wait a second, life has changed, employment has changed. So just keep that in mind as we go through it. But the intent is to provide some guidance and a guiding light as far as making decisions in the organization and using it as part of your process as you make decisions, as you approve budgets, and as you make big purchases moving forward. So, go ahead, Kevin. So what we did to get to this point, after we started the project, we put together some internal stakeholders as far as department members. And their names are in the report. And one of the decisions that was discussed and looked at was how far out do you want to make decisions, how far out do you want this to look like? And so it was between the RFP that you as the board sent out and then some internal feedback, we looked at a 5-year period. So the report or the strategic plan is generally looking at 2024 to 2029 as sort of your window of time. Again, things change, so don't view this as this is the way it's got to be. We took the opportunity, and my experience with strategic plans is that it really helps get an organization from where you have elected officials or a board, the members of the department, the officers, the chief officers, and then the community or the citizens, and lets them have a look at the organization and then have input as to how things will be moving forward. Like I said, if I had to make a recommendation to you, this is something that you don't put on a shelf, but annually at least, but when you develop your budget, when you start thinking about what you're gonna do next year, start looking at this and bring it out and say, where did we think we were gonna be and what do we want to do? What's the bigger vision that we have here as a group? This is also important because, as you probably know, elected officials turn over and they change. Election cycles happen. And in government, that is always, in my professional opinion, tough to plan long-term out because you have turnover and you have some elected officials, and I don't believe there's any of you sitting here, but sometimes in government, you have people that run on single platforms. And then they get on a board, they get their issue done, and they're gone. And then someone else comes in, and there's no sort of historical perspective moving forward as to why certain decisions were made, and then all of a sudden, there's a wind, the wind blows the other way, and now you're going the exact opposite way you were going. So this is important too, if you have new board members, it's a document they can look at and say, hey, where have they been, what did they talk about, and where are they going? Go ahead. So the first thing we wanted to look at is, as a group, especially coming from the outside, and not having a ton of experience with the department, is what drives your service. That's your number one, I guess, service as a fire department is providing service, responding to calls. So what drives that? We had an opportunity to have a little longer time to learn more about this organization than we do in a lot of cases, which was good, because we worked with you through some of the transition from the last chief and got to really have a good understanding of what was here, what the department was like, what the culture was, that type of thing. But service demand is what drives a lot for an organization. So from a calls for service perspective, looked at 5 years, and you'll see there your call volume is, and this is typical in most organizations, it's going up. Public demand for service is different than what it was even 10 years ago. Why someone calls 911 is completely different than what someone called 911 for 10 years ago. When you look at the
Give an example.
So on a more of a medical side of things, and this drives some of your call volume because you assist EMS, 10 to 15 years ago, you weren't seeing people call 911 for an earache, I have a headache, for an ambulance, and I'm sure we didn't study the Ripon ambulance, but knowing the industry, that's what people are calling 911 for today. The
So you're
healthcare
saying if
system is
someone calls
completely
for a
different.
headache, our fire department is going out?
Potentially, if the ambulance is out, if they're busy on something else, that could drive your call volume.
It could, but it hasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
we do
some-
go to some.
The day shift does because we have EMTs on it. So they do go to, like if Med 3 only has one person staffed on it,
Then we go.
then we
Some might
assist.
drive, or people call, sometimes you have someone that says, I don't know why my smoke detector is chirping, and it's a battery that's out. A lot more common to have that today than it was when I started in this industry 20-some years ago. You solved your own problems. Sort of a different socialization and culture that we all live in today in our society too.
So quick question, not for now, but this it brings up, so if typically we go out to help assist EMS, it's because EMS is busy, doesn't it mean that as a city, we should be looking at that EMS is understaffed? Is that what we're saying?
But I think from what I'm looking at, and I'll defer to you guys, but at times you're helping them when they're busy. The other times is when they have a call where it's significant and they need help. Someone's not breathing, they call for assistance. So it's not necessarily that they're not there, it's a more significant call for service.
Right, it's a level call, A,
Yeah.
B, C, D, E.
Right.
You know, when we get those to the E echo call, then we assist
Yeah.
EMS.
And sometimes, isn't it, okay, you got a big guy and they got two people on EMS, they can't get him in the thing.
Yeah.
Then it's a
So
lift
like-
assist, and then we go assist them, yes.
I mean, I know,
And
I've heard you guys do
7
quite a
years ago, we
few
didn't
of
have cell
those.
phones like we do
Right.
today.
Yeah.
So everybody's on their cell phones calling for the slightest sign of smoke, they're calling. you
I
know.
get it,
So-
okay.
Just a different nature. Your bigger, if you look at from between 2021 and 2022, that under assist EMS, that's where your call, that's what's driving your increase in your call volume that year. There's a lot of different factors that went into that. Some of that, I think, has been self-resolved through some internal procedures and policies. where maybe that call volume may not be as significant of a rise in 2023. It'll be interesting to see where 2023 lands. I know we were talking about December, you guys were really busy assisting them, or assisting ambulance, so it could continue on the rise, but that's what's driving your call volume, and that's not unusual in government first responder services. EMS is what's driving people's call volume.
A lot of falls.
Yep.
People call for falls.
Go ahead. So as I said before, we created an internal strategic planning team that had members of the department. They reviewed the department's mission statement. I'll go through some of these bullets in separate slides. We looked at compliance with mandates, as far as statutes, administrative rules, and things like that. Completed a SWOT analysis internally with the organization. So we said, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities, and what are your threats? And let the members of the department have that input. Everyone in the department was invited to participate in that. We took external stakeholder input through a survey, and then we developed the short, mid, and long-term goals that we'll talk about in a little bit. So the mission statement was in place prior to starting this process. That was the mission statement that the department had. We had the internal strategic planning team look at that and say, hey, is this really where we're at? Is this our mission statement as what we view as a department? And the committee reaffirmed that, no, this is what we believe is our mission statement. It's an important part of getting buy-in from your members. This is what we're here to do. So the mission statement did not change, it remained the same, and that was input from directly members of the department.
So there's no vision statement.
There's
So
not
you've
one yet.
combined mission and vision together because the first paragraph could be mission, and if you wanted a vision statement, the last two paragraphs
You
could be
could
vision.
divide it out too, right?
Wait, so, but on that, that's a good point, you're saying you combine that?
No,
That's how it was
that's how
before.
it's been.
It was that way before.
But, so here it says, it's meant to provide a concise explanation and that it supports the vision. So you're saying the committee decided that what we're looking at here is concise and that it supported a vision, that we don't have a vision laid out, and we were okay with just going forward?
No, it's not saying that there's not a vision laid out. The mission state, this is a sort of my view on this, is you don't need to have a mission and a vision statement. Some organizations do. Some have separate. Some have it together.
This is
So
together.
this is together. It's not to mean that there's not a vision for the organization.
I would say the first paragraph looks to be mission, the
I
last
agree.
two are vision. And I'm accustomed to seeing them separate too, but if everybody's good with that, it works.
Yeah, the committee said, let's keep it the same. That could be something you, as a group, say, hey, next time around, we want to update it. There's nothing to say you have to keep that mission statement for 5 years.
So if I could summarize this, I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
part of me thinks, okay, when professionals come in to provide, advice, and I might say this could be advice on how we could clean this up. However, if I'm hearing you, internally, our committee said, we like this fits. And so then we need to hear that as a board. That's why we didn't change it. So even though you might have had some advice, internally, you got the feedback, this fits. Is that what I'm hearing?
It fits, and I'm not personally, I did not give advice, and I'm not a believer that you have to have two. You have to have a mission and a vision.
Sure.
I think you could have one. You may hire somebody else to come here and tell you something completely different, but.
And tonight isn't the night where we're gonna just start pulling things apart. What Robert's doing is presenting this to us as a living document, and it's not written in stone. We as a board, as we develop policies and procedures in our bylaws, can adapt the strategic plan to match all of that. It's a working
Yeah,
document.
that's good. Part of me doesn't want to lose you guys, right? I mean, now is the time where we get you to
Sure.
bring advice, so that's why I kind of asked, but I get it, and that's good.
And I know in a lot of organizations I've worked with, it's a 5-year window, but annually you update it.
Yeah.
I see.
So like I was working on one today for first of the year. It's a 5-year window. The window goes through the end of 2025, but every year it gets cleaned up and updated, and if there's changes.
It'll be coming through with the budget process because the capital improvement plans are in here and we need to agree on what we're spending money on. So it'll be done during the budgeting process.
And you will have, part of the documents that we'll provide is a Word file of this too. So next year, if you want to do it as a board, you can change it. It's there, it should be easily changed.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just say something,
Yeah.
Robert? One of the other things too, moving forward is, this is a 5-year plan, but by the end of 2024 here, you're gonna wanna make what 2030 looks like, right? So you're already pre-planning even now for that, the 5th year moving on from here. So again, as the document changes, you might have new ideas, but it might be 4 years out, 5 years out. So by next year, the plan will be 2025 to 2030 or whatever it looks like. So it's always changing, always new ideas, whatever that looks like. The committee should meet. I have a strategic plan too. We've met twice a year, once in the spring and then once in the fall, because by then you're working on budgets are approved, and then we're already planning for the 5th year moving forward. So it's a great document to have, as a foundation and start building on, and then, a continual planning process for the department and for the board here to see the progress and new things.
All right. So, like I said earlier, the first thing we wanted to address was compliance with mandates, and get those sort of out of the way and cleaned up. So we looked at a couple different documents that drive mandates in the state. One is, had a lot of different names. It's currently called SPS 330. It's an administrative code. It used to be called ILR 30. It was called something else for a while, but that is something that you will be mandated to comply with if you're a fire department in the state. Part of that comes along with the state 2% dues inspection that I know this group has talked about in the past. So that ties into this. The first thing, and some of this has already been done during 2023, your process, they've been working on it. So it's not to say that none of this is done. When we started the process, it necessarily wasn't there. You have ESO, which is a records management system. It's a software program. The fire inspection records can be stored there. It makes for simple retrieval of records. And for when the state inspector comes and says, let me see your records, it's an easy place to say, here you go, we have them here, they're organized by address. It's like a file, it's electronic storage. And Heather's been in the process of doing that, I think is almost up to speed for 2023 right now. So you're in a good place. The state mandates the department have a health and safety committee. You have safety officers, but there should be a committee that meets at least twice a year. It's pretty simple to put together. Generally, it's to talk about safety issues. Some departments use it to talk about injuries that may have happened in the department. Some use it to talk about equipment, and should we look at this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment because this one might be less prone to injury for our employees. Meet twice a year and keep minutes of that and keep it in the file, so when or if someone ever comes to ask to see it as from a mandate perspective, you have that. Your injury reporting system, you have a system that people report injuries. This would be more to compile that data in one place back to a record management system. ESO does it. You can put your injury, if you have an injury report, put it in there, and you have documentation related to that. The state does require you have a system to track injuries. You have a system here, it just sometimes isn't as easy to retrieve all that information as it may be. If you use it, you're paying ESO, might as well put it in there as a support part of the product. The department's worked a lot on personnel files over the last year. I know there's a lot of work that's gone into that. Part of a personnel file is a training record. So you have a record of everyone's training, not only the certifications they have, but when they come to a training, you do trainings, at night, a couple nights a week, or a month, I'm sorry. You have a record of who was there, the date, the time, what hours were, what topics were covered, and even a lesson plan is helpful. This is one of those things that if anything ever unfortunate happens, people will come and ask you for training records as an organization and say, show me that this person was trained, what were they trained on, how often were they trained. And the state does have a requirement for training. It's pretty minimal as far as ongoing training, but they do have a documented requirement that you have to have at least monthly training for your department. The incident reports, right now, right now what you're currently doing is for an actual fire, you file what's called a NIFRS, National Fire Incident Reporting System. It's a national database that FEMA manages, that in order to be eligible for pretty much grant money from FEMA, you have to do this. And it's good practice too. It's not just about the money, but it gives the country a lot of data on why things happen. It's also what the insurance companies want. Anytime there's a fire, they call and say, can you send me your incident report? And it's for their client to get documentation that something happened. Right now, you're entering only your fire incidents, or you were, into that database. We would recommend, and the group recommended, that you look at putting all your incidents. So even it's a short incident report, you go help the EMS, there's a quick form, you fill it out. So now you can track some of the record of what's demanding your service. I know Heather had to do, they're in now. Okay, so she's caught up now.
I do every
Yep.
incident.
So that's a positive. I know when we were looking for some of that historical data, she had to do a lot of hand counting to track some of the old calls down. So that's a huge move forward for you.
So, my original question of why is EMT more increased, theoretically moving forward, you should just be able to pull the report and answer that.
Not why it's increased, just how many more calls would go on.
Yeah, if there's
But I mean,
trends, why?
Yeah.
If there's a trend, is it more during the day? Is it at night? Is it, you'll see that.
Did you retroactively like add previous years or just going forward?
2022 and 2023 in the ESO. And I can still get into Firehouse to get the old records out of Firehouse that are in there.
You've also done a lot of work on your training, and I talked a little bit about the training records, but your department best practices and the committee, the group agreed, let's have a training officer assigned. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a promoted person. Training officers and departments are all different ranks, but someone that has the background, the training, to develop lesson plans, put together a training, keep people actively involved, and then have an annual plan. So moving forward, one way that I like to do this is, what are the critical skills our people have to know? So for fire departments, it'd be working with your breathing apparatus. That's a critical skill that you can't have someone who doesn't know, not be refreshed on how to use the breathing apparatus. Might be the thermal imaging cameras you talked about before. How do you operate that? How do you operate the aerial? You're on the ladder truck and you get to a scene, you got to put the aerial up. So pick your critical skills and then say, okay, let's at least once a year go through all those critical skills and have a plan that we have to have attendance at those events. And if you didn't do it, there's a makeup plan. So you have to do it. So that would be the annual training plan, and the attendance expectation. And you may have 15, it doesn't have to be hundreds of them, it may be 15 or 20 things that you say, this is the bare minimum we're gonna hit every year as a department to talk about. Maybe, we're gonna do an extrication training, we're gonna do a pulling hose lines training one night and have that built into place. So if I miss a training, if I'm on the fire department and I miss a training because I have an excuse, I know what I missed and where can I go find that information, so I make sure I get caught up on whatever was new or refreshed. If you're like me, you gotta see something multiple times, and if I don't do it, I gotta refresh myself on it. I just don't retain, you don't retain those skills unless you do it over and over again. You've done a ton of work on your vehicle maintenance records. You're in the process of cleaning those up now. Pump test, ladder testing, all those records, you're in the process of cleaning that up. There was a fair amount of documentation that we had trouble finding initially. But you're in the process, you're on the road forward to get that in a good place. The other one that, this comes from statutes, not from necessarily SPS 330, is as a public employer, you need to have a grievance process in place for employees that addresses determinations, discipline, and workplace safety. And there's an entire process in the statute that should be in like a personnel manual somewhere. And that got mandated, I believe it was in 2011 when Act 32 got passed. which was the Act 10, Act 30, 32, all that stuff that happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jim
But it
can
only
give us-
applies to employees, it doesn't necessarily apply to your other folks,
To employees of,
the municipality.
Oh.
So when you have volunteers or some paid on call that aren't really employees, it doesn't necessarily apply. We're gonna talk about
Yeah.
that a little later too,
Okay.
but you need one.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, we don't have that, we need that.
so these are, the next step that we did is always, for me, the most interesting part of these processes when we do strategic plans is the SWOT analysis. They're the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from members of the department. So this is an opportunity that we say, okay, everyone get in a room, there's no rank in the room, there's no, don't be nervous, if you say what you want to say, but it's if at the tip, when we write strengths, what are the strengths of the Ripon Area Fire District? What are the weaknesses? What's at the tip of your tongue? Say it, and then we're going to put that on the board. And if you think it, someone else is probably thinking it. And so we look for trends and patterns. Sometimes you'll see things pop up. 4 or 5 people may say the same thing. And that occurred just as generally what I thought was going to happen is, a lot of people have the same opinion, which is good because you know you're on the right track then usually when you start hearing the same thing over and over again. So as far as your strengths, apparatus and equipment, leadership in the department, the station, camaraderie, the financial funding, and a positive relationship with PD, EMS, and DPW. And again, keep in mind, these are from members of the organization. This was internal. Weaknesses, communications equipment.
Does that mean radios?
I would say it radios is I think how I felt
Is that what it meant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interpersonal communications between members, and that's not unusual in a workplace. People have, you have different personalities, people getting along, some don't get along. Nothing to be shocked about. Sufficient members to cover needs. At times, you're a paid-on-call department, and at times availability can be limited. Holidays, weekends, nights, things like that. There were some comments about, at the time, the way the training was run and the details of that. The command staff is very familiar with, and I think they've been working to change that. Communication between the board and department members. I think some of the members thought there was limited communication between the board and department members. Part of that is, again, this process wasn't for me as a consultant to say, no, you're wrong. There is, so just keep that in mind. This is someone's thought, but attending board meetings, they're open to the public. I've reminded several members of this department as I've talked to them about that, like, you can come and see. The board's they're not mean people, they're not looking, they don't, these are all normal people doing their thing, public
Watch it on
service.
TV.
Yeah, so, public relations and communications, I think you're all well aware that there's some people that feel that maybe there was something awry in the organization at times. In the public, there's some perception, I guess I'll call it, doesn't mean necessarily to be the truth. But that was what I think came out in that point. It was discussed as how to improve the image of the organization. And then the public understanding of department operations. I know several of the members expressed concern that sometimes the public doesn't understand, let's say, why they see a fire engine driving down the road or at the grocery store or something like that. And there's criticism publicly in different places, social media, things about that. As far as opportunities, so this is where the department, your members of the department see that there's an opportunity for the department to improve itself. Through leadership training more with your mutual aid departments and your neighbors. So there were several comments about that as far as your coverage area, you used to cover more communities than you did in the past, or you do today, I'm sorry. And is that opportunity to strengthen your organization and look at opportunities that may be out there again for other communities? Recruit college and high school students as a way to have a path to become a paid-on-call in the organization and maybe a career path in the future in the service. There's members who left who may want to return, and I think you've seen that. And then improve your SOPs and SOGs, which is one of the recommendations we've been working on, and I know this team here has been working on those. Threats, the number one threat that pretty much anywhere I go is financial funding, and any fire or government service, people get worried about financial funding. But I think you're well aware of not only the needs of the department, but also the challenges as local government you face to fund services. And it's a balance, just like anything else. Your training hours to meet minimum department requirements. So I talked a little bit before about having like a training plan and having attendance requirements. And sometimes that doesn't go over well with some members of the department. So you have different opinions on that. Some people say, I should, I'm basically in essence a volunteer. If I show up for training, great. If not, you can't make me show up. On the other side of the coin, I would say, well, you gotta be proficient because it's a safety issue for you to be on the fire department, to be a training. So you have some different takes on things. Driving distance to get certification classes. I think we've experienced that as we helped you guys over the last year is your tech college primarily runs classes fairly far with a fair distance from here for your certifications. So your firefighter 1 certification, your entry level firefighter, fire officer, driver operator.
Can't you do any of that online?
They've started to offer some online now, which is really new. That's like brand new. But to take some of those classes means driving to Fond du Lac. I think even West Bend, they have classes they run there.
Beaver Dam is the
Beaver
biggest
Dam.
one we go to right now.
And that's a drive for people who are basically committing, volunteering their time to go to the classes. And it's not like, hey, I can just go down the road to the high school and walk in and take a class at night or something like that. And the tech colleges, it's not an unusual challenge in even more urban environments, because the tech colleges have districts, they have places they want to teach the classes. To get instructors to go somewhere far from their home base can be tough for them, and they have expense issues. So online classes like Officer 1 are starting to help, but the entry-level class, it's still a hands-on class where you have to have somebody go and actually physically do something to pass the class. And the tech colleges, while they're funded by government, they need to make sure they have minimum enrollment in those classes, so that if they get 3 people, they're not going to run the class. Couple comments about low acuity calls that take up time. And this is not uncommon in departments that are where you're at as far as like a paid-on-call organization. Low acuity calls, like I talked about before, people call 911 for things that 15, 20 years ago they wouldn't have called for. And so now I'm coming as a paid-on-call or volunteer, I'm coming from home, leaving my family, leaving my job, whatever the case may be. And sometimes you get there, and if hey, it's an actual structure fire, I'm sort of, I view it as, boy, I came and I got something done, I accomplished something, helped somebody. Sometimes the lower acuity calls, a lot of departments are finding that those take up more time and sometimes even drive people who want to volunteer or be paid on call away from the department because they're more frequent, they're less, I guess what I'll call satisfying as far as community service, and sometimes that drives people away. And you had a couple members that talked about that, is how could we sort of deal with some of the more low acuity calls without having to come in at 2 in the morning? Is there a way to do that with a smaller force? I don't know that there really is. I've got a couple suggestions we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's a challenge, especially in a paid-on-call department where you already have a system, sort of an on-call system that's in place. At times, sometimes you have to tell people, if you don't want to do those calls, maybe this isn't for you anymore, because it's part of the job. That's where it's become. There was some concern about differing safety standards in mutual aid departments, and I think on a positive side, it was more that this department has a higher standard as far as safety of its personnel than maybe some of your neighboring departments do. And that's a concern about responding to other communities. Sometimes you run into departments with less of a standard. So this was a positive when you look at the Ripon Fire Department. It's concern about some of the neighboring departments you might have to deal with. And then fire department in any community wouldn't be anything without grapevine and gossip. That is how, unfortunately, rumors spread, and like in any other workplace. And it's tough to control, but one thing is just to keep people informed. Almost kill them with information, and the grapevine usually goes away, is my experience. All right. So we did the external stakeholder survey. We put this out, it was an online survey. We, these are the toughest part of strategic plan, in my opinion. Because you're asking residents who don't generally get involved in the day-to-day business of the fire department to grade something that they may have never even used before. Most people don't call 911. It's a small number of people that actually call 911. So when you say, are you satisfied with service? Sometimes people, it's just what I heard from my neighbor, I heard down the street, I heard at church, or I heard somewhere else. And a lot of times the number, just like any survey, the numbers you get as far as response, you're not going to get 50% of the residents of Ripon or the district are responding. This is a smaller number, but it should give you a feel for what is out there. 86% of the respondents were residents. So the majority of people that responded to the survey live in the area serviced by the department. 18%, and there's some overlap because you might have both. They could have responded, I'm a resident and I own a business, or I work here. Work or own a business. 5% consisted of people that were on or formerly were on the department, and 24% said they utilized the service, which is actually a pretty high number in my experience when I do these. So the first question they were asked was, do you feel the Ripon Fire Department is effective in providing service? And then there's 4 services that the group picked to ask that question about. Fire suppression, you'll see it was a vast majority, yes. Fire code inspections, it was not sure. Some people, when you start looking at some of the comments related to the responses, was they just don't have a business, so they don't know. Others were, and I think earlier in the meeting you talked about your fees. There was a lot of questions at the time about how the fees were charged the last couple of years. And there were some responses that when you start looking at the comments type of responses, you start sort of figuring out what some of the concerns are, and that's where I think the concern primarily was, I got charged this fee, last year it was different than this year, and now I'm upset because my fee changed. So there was a fair amount of not sure in that group.
Speaking of the comments, I see that there's some on the next page, but the comments that you're referring to, is that included in the future of what you'll send to us? Or?
I can give you all the comments. Some of, what I will tell you is there are, as with any online survey, you get what you get sometimes.
I would recommend we not actually, that we look at this aggregate,
Yeah.
and that we not look, because we don't know who responded to this.
There was no name tag.
Yeah, it's, so the aggregate is going to give us a better sense of what's going on instead of looking at individual comments.
There are definitely people that had omissions in their comments that they were on when they responded to the survey. There's a couple of them. So as with any survey, you have to take what you get. Public education, real high grade on that. There was a lot of positive on your public education, getting out in the community, that type of thing, the different events you attend, and then rescue for service. Provide your thought on the public image of the fire district. Again, like I said before, a lot of different people's opinions on the image, both internally and externally. Above average community involvement and input, dedication, integrity. That there was a sort of an upside down answer on that one. Professionalism, and then response time to emergencies. So some of the concerns, and this comes from the comments, and sort of aggregate some of those comments. Lack of firefighters, which I think we've heard in the past, the department used to have more firefighters. That's common throughout the industry in panic call departments. Tougher to get people to do it, tougher to get people to volunteer their time. You're recruiting, but there's always opportunity. Physical issues within the department. I think that discussed some of the things you've been addressing with your audit and things like that. That's where I saw most of those comments coming from. Limited experience. You have a lot of younger people on the department, some that don't have a lot of experience. That's a challenge. And then the transparency on the fiscal issues, which ties back also to, I think, the fiscal issues that commented earlier. Positives and strengths, community involvement. There are a lot of great comments about fire department comes to this event, we see them at whatever event, they come, they're great with the kids. Tons of comments about that. The dedicated members of the department and the equipment that you have, and you as a board provide for the department. So after we took all this information, sort of the inputs, then we worked with the group to create some goals. And where should the department head as far as short-term, midterm, and long-term? Short-term being in 6 to 18 months, midterm 2 to 5 years, long-term 5 to 10 years. Again, this plan covers 5 years. So long-term or long range is very conceptual, and that's not unusual. The short term, we were much more specific in developing those goals, just because it's shorter term. The midterm are more general and vague, and then the long term, like I said, it's more vision than it is the specifics. This is what we're going to do tomorrow or Thursday. But it gives some idea of where things to go. So short-term goal 1. So we talked a lot about organizational structure, and this was one of the things you had in your RFP when you asked for the strategic plan, was to talk about organizational structure. And what does this department need? I think there was some question about, does it need to be full-time? Does it need to be all full-time, part-time, things like that. So we looked at and said, how do we transition, or how should this look? So what we got down to, and there's an organizational chart in the report, and then 2 slides next, 2 slides back. But we talked about how this department primarily is a paid-on-call department. I think in the members' opinion, in our opinion, it can remain that way. Your service demand doesn't drive a full-time department 24/7, 365. Do you need support staff that support a paid-on-call department? Yes. And at times that may mean you need a couple people that are here on a regular basis up to full-time to support the paid-on-call. Because what was years ago volunteer departments, as you can probably see in what we've been talking about, the administrative requirements of a fire department are significantly different than they were 25 years ago for especially a paid-on-call volunteer. So how do you maintain the standard of service? How do you maintain the safety for the members of the department? And how do you meet all the requirements that are out there? That does require some administrative commitment and time.
We don't have battalion chiefs now, do we?
You have captains who oversee
Right.
battalions, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So what we looked at is how do you get, you have a lot of, over the course of the next couple of years, you as an organization probably have a lot of administrative work to do that Heather puts a ton of hours in and needs probably some more help, to be frank with you. There is a lot of work that goes into managing 20 to 30 part-time employees that have training, that have equipment, trucks that are $500,000 to $2 million, and keeping all that up. So our recommendation, and we worked with the group, is to look for someone who can administer, has an administrative background, to put this together, and it gets you moving in the right direction as an organization, and someone that has the skills that can be here in an office, but not necessarily, I don't know that you need a full-time, at this point, chief with what Heather's position is doing on a full-time basis. Sort of a blend. You have a full-time sort of assistant chief with a fire chief that's a little more administrative, fire that should be a little more vision-oriented, where are we going, and has that experience to bring that to the department. Right now, you have the next bullet point, you have what's referred to as 4 battalions. So those are sort of an on-call group. You're short some people, and that's creating overlap where people are having to do multiple nights on call. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't go back to 4 battalions, but in a short term, I would consider 3, so everyone knows, here's my schedule, this is when I'm on call. And you have a lot of people trying to fill open slots on a schedule when you have 4 battalions, go to 3.
I don't necessarily want to get into this because it's getting late, but if it looks, so this is steps to achieve that we should, you're saying that the recommendation is to hire a fire chief to work 20 to 30 hours per week.
Right.
That is probably going to get a lot of attention, and we're going to have to answer questions if that, are you going to provide reasons why you think that?
Well, I think what we're doing here tonight is we're approving this document. And then on the agenda for February, we're gonna talk about short-term goal 1, which is this goal. Does this work for us? What do we wanna do with it?
Well, I guess my point is I'd like to know more about why that's a recommendation. Like, I don't know if I see the reasons underneath that,
Yeah, so
or am
in,
I missing that?
no, there's a lot of reason behind it. If you want more detail, I'm more than happy to provide that, and we can support that documentation at the time.
When we talk about it next time?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
what we're gonna do is, at the next meeting, I've been taking notes, that we're gonna talk about short-term goal 1, what's the pleasure of the board, and then a short-term goal number 2. Those are the 2 most important right now, but I'm not sure that we can do 4 of them in a night.
Yeah.
Well, 5 or 6, 7, 8 or 9.
I mean, it's meant to be 18 months for that number. I mean, you know, if you hit one every couple months, you'd be doing pretty good at this point.
So, I mean, this is a planning document, and again, we can make it what we need it to be for our needs. But that's not what we're doing tonight.
And keep in mind, this is not, you're not agreeing, voting to accept the report is not saying we're gonna do everything that's in here. I've never seen a board do that ever when we've done this. This is saying, these are recommendations, this was input from your members, the community, different feedback we got from interviews. Doesn't mean you have to do exactly what it says, and in 6 months, it could be something completely, you may say, no, we need to go in a different direction. It's not necessarily, this is what it's gotta be.
But just to be clear, you'll bring some of that, you're gonna work
I
together.
can bring some
then.
document, yeah. Yeah, we have, I mean, supporting documentation that
Okay.
definitely can show that.
Thanks.
Yeah. There was, part of the request was to look at your daytime staffing. That was part of the RFP for the process.
And
You
you're
had,
recommending we go down to 2 part-time?
so what we're saying is you have 2 part-time during the day,
And right now, we're budgeted for 3.
and you have Heather here during the day, who's a certified firefighter. There are creative ways to get to a point where if you could have a fire engine roll out the door with 4 people on it, you'd be in a good spot. If a call came in and during the day you had 4 people rolling out on a fire engine. So what we're talking about here is you would have, at least with your 2 part-time, you have Heather here during the day, and there's some discussion about a fire inspector or a part-time person doing fire inspection. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be in the building together at all times, and there are some departments that take that position, but I don't know that your call volume drives that need, that, hey, they need to all be here, and that may have been a model that this department used in the past, is we want 4 or 5 people in the building all the time. Use the people that you have to do work, other than, they're not just here just to go on calls. And
Right.
in some of the interviews that we did, there may have been a perception that the daytime people were here just to go on calls and not do other maintenance and things like that.
I think that in 2023, there was a lot more activity among the day people with hose testing.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of activities, at least in 2023, that they hadn't previously done before. And that just keeps
Yeah,
increasing.
if you're paying them to be here, have them do some of the work that we're talking about, maybe isn't getting done or wasn't getting done. So on the next slide, we talks about a fire inspector. So a lot of important things come from the code enforcement process. And as you have communities that are developing too and building buildings, there's a lot of questions about the systems that go into those buildings, the sprinkler systems, the fire alarm systems. The college has a project going on right now where there's questions about that. One thing you could look at is to have a little more consistent presence in who your fire inspector is, rather than just having different people every day do fire inspections. Just have a consistent person. You've gone to that with a part-time person doing a lot of that now, and I think it's, from what I hear, going very well. That person, a consideration could be to take that position and look at that as a full-time position in the future versus a full-time chief. One of the models that a lot of departments used, and I think sometimes is a challenge, is asking the chief to also do the fire inspections. From a recruiting standpoint, it's tough to find. If I want to be the chief, if I'm coming from another place to be the chief, I'm not necessarily wanting to be the guy going out and doing fire inspections. I'm more looking at my career as a sort of a manager and a bigger vision than doing fire inspections. And that system worked for years, but I think you may have run into that here a little bit, is that wasn't the focus of the position. Because a lot of people say, hey, I'm the chief, why am I doing the fire inspection? Someone else should do that stuff. So to recruit someone to do that is a pretty unique thing to do. So this person also could help you with that staffing model we talked about with 4 people during the day, where you have the most probably challenge. One of the biggest challenges you have is having someone trained to actually drive the apparatus. The state DSPS requires you have a certain certification to drive and pump the apparatus. When you have a person here that would be consistent, that could know that job, they could do fire inspections, be trained to do that. Part-time people are sort of a come and go type of workforce. This would be a little more standard, consistent presence here too.
Have you seen departments advertise the 2 options? If you're interested in full-time, here's what it would look like. You would also be doing inspections. If you're not interested in full-time, here's what it would look like. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, there's departments that have part-time, full-time, you could.
No, but I mean that they advertise both, is my question.
A lot of departments will advertise for a firefighter to do fire inspections. And have a requirement in there that you have to be, to get the job, you have to be certified to be a fire inspector. It's a certification.
Right.
Yeah, it would not be uncommon to see that. So the last slide for short-term goal 1 is just a more of a visual as to what that group, that organization structure could look like. And that's with the 3 battalions. And like I was pointing out earlier, we're using the term battalion chief in here as a sort of the ranking officer on each battalion. Currently you have a captain that's overseeing battalions. And then each of the battalion chiefs gets a responsibility to support, like we talked about, the training, the safety, and the apparatus and equipment. And those are part-time positions. They don't necessarily, that's not full-time work there. All right. We talked about the Health and Safety Committee. That's short-term goal 2. That should be pretty quick to cover. The only thing that's required in there, other than minutes and to meet twice a year, is that a representative of the employee group be represented. So in other words, if you have like an association that they appoint someone to be on the group, so it's not just all appointees of the fire chief, but generally the committees are mostly appointed by the chief. Create a recruitment and retention committee. This came directly from the members of your department. Hey, we should do this. Have a group that's focused on that. That can be a mentor for newly recruited members too, people that want to work with new people, bring them in. So as you probably know, going into any new organization can be intimidating sometimes. So to have someone that you work with to bring in, sort of be your person to ask questions about. The records management system we've talked about, short-term goal 4, as to how it could be used. Heather's been working on that. I think you're making good progress there already. Short-term goal 5 is the training program I talked about a little earlier. Short-term goal 6 would be the organizational culture, and that's any organization cultures was one of your biggest challenges, but how do you use committees to get people involved? How do you have officer meetings where they can come in and hear what the chief's vision or what's the priorities of the department currently? And then number 7 on the next slide, and I know this group has talked a lot about that, is the bylaws, the policies, procedures, the fee schedule. Get on a consistent schedule for updating those documents and having those updated and regularly looked at. 8 and 9 on the final slide, the capital improvement plan, which is in the document, and that was asked for as part of the RFP. And then 9 is the two-way radios. That's going to be a hot topic probably you're facing or going to be facing. One thing you could do is, if you can't fund it internally, is the FEMA Fire Act grants. They love funding radios.
We need to get our EIN documentation. We don't have that from the federal government.
Yeah,
We're
so that would
missing
be, you're gonna need that to
documentation.
apply. But that would be if I were you, I would
We're
make sure you
working on
apply
it.
on
We're
that,
working
yeah.
on it.
So midterm goals, up 2 to 5 years. Your mutual aid departments, I think that's your opportunity to start training with them more. Local law enforcement. Unfortunately, in today's world, we deal with things that happen, law enforcement with active assailant shooter events, and be prepared for how that would look if that were to happen. Law enforcement and federal training dollars are available for that. This is something that, number 2, is you'll gather this information as you get your inspection records in a better place. But that's looking at what are your risks. So, and this is really preparing for probably more than 5 years down the road when is the community growing? What are our new buildings that are coming in? What do we have to protect and what are we investing in as far as the fire department? But it gives you an idea of what's out there, and through that website, you can plug data in there, and it's a really good tool to use to put that together. Doesn't need to be, it looks a little bit overwhelming, but it can be pretty simple. One of the things on number 3 is how does the department have more communication with the board, is maybe consider doing an annual report with the board, having some of the members, did the chief put an annual report together, having some members of the department there to talk about what they accomplished through the year. That gives the board the opportunity to meet the employees and vice versa, and then also get to your town boards and your city council and actually get in front of them. You as a community own the department, so your town board and your city council members are important to.
For town of Ripon, has the fire district ever come in and done something like that?
The previous chief did.
Good,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
good.
The short-term goal forward would be to talk about a performance appraisal program. We talked about those critical skills, but then doesn't need to be in the short term, but midterm is how do I know as a member where I can improve? And you know, most of us who have been in the workforce, you had a performance review or something annually, something like that. Give that to the members so they know where they can concentrate their focus and improve themselves on. And then community input. Like I said, this is number 5 is preparing you for that future 5+ years. How do you know that you're meeting the needs of the community? And that's a challenge to always talk about. Let's see here. And then the final one, number 6. So this was a lot of, I got a lot of interesting input and feedback when we talked about what's the future of the organization, and there was discussion from different groups that we entertained. Discussion with was what should the fire department look like? Should the fire department be a district like it is now, where you're owned by multiple communities and you have input at a voting board like you do now? Some communities, the fire department is one of those communities' city departments, and then it's a contract with other communities around them. And there was a lot of discussion on that. In the end, the group and me as a professional doing this, I think the position you're in now, where it's jointly owned, is the good position moving forward. It allows you room for expansion. I think you're on a good road to cleaning up some of the administrative challenges you have. And that sometimes city, you know, when it's one community and you can use the resources of the city administration or the HR department or the finance people, that helps you. But I think with a strong administrative staff and you're creating that process here now, I think you're in a good place. And in the future, I think you're going to see more of what the Ripon Area Fire District is, where it's joint departments. The state statutes people are really looking at those to benefit regionalization, and keeping that how it is today is what I think everyone felt was the right thing to do. The other point we talked about was
Wait, what did you just say? Keeping it how it is
how it is
today?
as far as a joint group where communities have a vote at the table. So in other words,
Because you're recommending a change.
No, we're saying that, well,
I see
the
consolidation.
ambulance, so the next point, well, I haven't gotten to that one yet, but consolidation with the ambulance. So your ambulance service is currently a city department that contracts with other communities.
And they are they're their own individual fund. They do have a little bit of levy in.
Probably
for
have a
first aid.
special-
They're, I forgot the.
Special
what's the
revenue,
term?
maybe?
Um,
They're
They-
basically running on the revenue.
Yep, yep.
Is what they're doing.
But it's not necessarily, it's revenue that's not necessarily levy.
Yep. One thing that was looked at is, so in the future, communities, less volunteerism, less people want to do paid on call, part-time. So at some point, that critical decision will have to be made is, do we need full-time people, more full-time people than we have now? Ambulance, I'm assuming they're probably facing something similar. There are probably numbers of part-time employees is a challenge. Do they need more full-time people? And at some point, that investment may be worthwhile looking at and saying, could we do it together, fire and ambulance, and have cross-trained people? So Beaver Dam, other communities around you have the fire department and the ambulance. It's both, they're firefighters and EMTs, or firefighters and paramedics. And then they'll have some people that are just firefighters and some people that are just EMS, but there's a core group that do both. And would that be of value to the community if you're going to pay, if you're gonna get to the point where you have to say, boy, we are gonna have to invest in more full-time people because we don't have a population that's doing paid on call, part-time, whatever that looks like. Is there, rather than having an ambulance service go hire a bunch of people full-time and the fire department hire people full-time, could you do it in a more cooperative manner and then get a better value for your dollar? Ambulances, as we talked before, that's what drives, EMS is driving a lot of the call volume, but when you have a fire, you need people, and you need trained people. So that's something that I think, moving forward, 5+ years down the road, you may want to start saying, should this be something we look at, and how would that look? And then, what is the organizational structure? Is it a regional organization like this? Right now, your ambulance service is a contract, city contracting with towns. Does this model look a little better for the ambulance?
Yeah, the word I was trying to think of is enterprise fund. The ambulance service is an enterprise fund, but they do have, you pay X amount of dollars per person to the EMS.
Yep.
We are and Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but we are considered also an enterprise fund. However, we do have levying ability. We have the ability to levy, which EMS doesn't. The city would have to do it for them because we're our own district. And so, and then the percentage of payments that come from the towns are based on, well, it's based on, it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be based on the capitated rate of
I was thinking of that.
equalized value, but we have, they're doing assessed value. So that's something we need to work on this year too. I need to come over and talk with you all about it, Tom, and look at the documentation so that we're doing apples and apples.
So under a model, and again, it's many years out, but theoretically, if the recommendation is to consolidate, I could imagine that would mean a full-time chief. And if we're looking, if the recommendation is also to hire a part-time chief, is there something in the, that you have to put?
It's not, you're going way down, and if you did it, you'd most likely have a chief for both, and then you'd have assistant chiefs for EMS and then the fire district. That's one model. But
Yeah.
that's a long way.
That's way down the road.
I think you're
That's a
But I
short.
wanted to ask if you had to put something in the hiring policy. I mean, if you grandfather someone in and they're like, hey, wait, I mean, is there anything that we need to put into the policy as we go out to hire? Do we need to consider that?
No, not right now, because we're not there yet. What we need to do is revamp our policies and procedures right now so that they aren't in conflict with one another and that they represent both paid on call as well as staff members, like full-time staff members.
I think so the vision with the part-time person, the chief, I'm talking that's 5 years, and you're probably gonna have to reassess
Yeah,
that.
or even
person.
2 years.
Reassess the position.
It could be 2 years.
Now, there is, from a legal perspective, that Jim can speak much better to this than I can about some ownership rights of being appointed a fire chief and different ways you can do things, so that's not personal, that's not an issue or to
Okay.
limit your liability there.
Okay.
But that gets pretty detailed. Just something to think about. But I think this is something that will take time. This isn't gonna happen in 2 years, or this is probably gonna be 5, 10 years down the road when you start seeing more challenges getting part-time, paid on call, volunteer, that type of thing. Something to think about. All right, so then we went a little farther out. This is sort of the longer range vision. Is if you run into that model, you maybe open up yourselves to some more partnerships with other communities. The ambulance is serving more communities than fire is right now. So maybe there'd be some opportunity to bring on some additional territory, which also could be revenue for the organization from a financial perspective.
And there's the working together, the benefit of that is the state in the budget passed an innovation fund. Now, that hasn't been established yet. I'm not sure how it's gonna work, but the goal of the innovation fund through the state allows, if there's intermunicipal agreements or cooperation or neighboring communities, there is supposed to be some funding coming up here by doing that. So I don't know what amount of dollars that looks like, but that opportunity is there, and it was created to foster cooperation amongst different municipalities together, different entities, ambulance and fire, but keeping an eye on that could be down the road an opportunity to, hey, we're gonna get $100,000 because we're working with the ambulance, or we might get, whatever that looks like for staffing. So it's a good thing to see where this is gonna go. That might be an opportunity that's not even on here yet, cooperating with some other entity locally here, so.
We talked a lot throughout the process too about just your general space needs. As your ambulance service, even though they're a separate organization, is there some cooperative, you're gonna build out living quarters here. If you're gonna make that investment, are they in a position where they need living quarters? I only been to their location once, but I seemed like they were probably looking for more space.
Yeah.
And is that an opportunity to look together and say, hey, we have a half-finished living area up there, they probably need something similar. Could we do this together and co-locate? And is that just a partnership you want to take on for a while and see, it doesn't mean you have to jump in and do everything all at once, but there's a lot of opportunity out there for that. And then apparatus sharing, long-term goal too. This I know had come up with at this several board meetings I've been at.
Mm-hmm.
Ladder truck, if you have to replace that ladder truck, that's $2 million right now. And does every fire department in Fond du Lac County need a ladder truck?
Well, and that's why back in 2010, Mavis was developed with the idea of sharing equipment, not only having people come to the fire, but it was, do we all have to purchase the same equipment? Or through Mavis, can we pull in a ladder truck, and can we pull in another tanker from another district? So that, Fond du Lac County Fire, or the city of Fond du Lac Fire had been working on that, for well over a decade.
And I think prices are just gonna keep going up, unfortunately. 25% a year is not sustainable for an organization where you're using, you put the ladder truck on the road 25 times a year. It keeps it in shape, doesn't wear it out, but at $3 million, can you share one with your neighbors? Go ahead. So we looked at, also part of the contract was to look at compensation comparisons. So we looked at it from two different perspectives, one from the fire chief's perspective and what are comparable communities or departments out there. And sometimes, if you look at some of these names of the communities, you may say, hey, that one's bigger than Ripon, or that one's smaller. This was based on coverage area, not just necessarily, like.
So is that like a base pay? Because my understanding was the way we were paying the former chief was he had a base pay, but then he got paid on call too.
So this was set, this is set, they were all
That's set.
salary.
There was no additional payment based on,
Not in my
calls.
research, not for these
Okay,
departments,
okay.
no. This was more of a salary system,
okay.
yeah. And then go ahead to the next one. Then we looked at how they pay firefighters, assistant chiefs, captains, lieutenants. With the various rank structures, this got very tough to be apples to apples comparisons. Because each department does it differently, and I will tell you, some of them don't, might not pass muster if you asked an attorney how they were paying their people.
But it doesn't, like it says assistant deputy chief, is the assumption these are all full-time jobs?
No, these are mostly part-time.
Okay.
Like Hartford, the assistant deputy, that's a full-time position. That's $61,963. But like Kettle Moraine, that's a part-time, $19 an hour.
Okay.
So you can see there's some differences. And then as you get down to firefighter, there's some are per call, some are a year, no matter what you do, which I don't know that that's a viable option, but that's what they do. So it gives you an idea, but from an hourly basis, when you start looking at aggregate, I think I averaged out for like firefighter, lieutenant, captain, anywhere from $15 to $20 an hour was sort of the going rate that was out there.
I wish you had Ripon on here. We could directly
I can
compare.
add Ripon in there.
Could you?
Yep.
Thanks.
You can go to the next slide, Kevin. So this is, Kevin spent a ton of time putting together this with Heather and Ellen. This is the capital improvement plan that is recommended. This is the summary. In the document, there's more detail to back up the summary. Couple questions I know I had when I was here in November that came to me was one about the radios. $120,000 is what's in there for radios. Depending, what I found out, and I think I said, boy, I better check on that. Depending what vendor you use, they're gonna drive that number. So this was, 120 was one vendor. That's on the, from a cost perspective, the lower cost vendor. And I know that the department's been working to test some of those radios. And so that number is solid if that's the vendor you choose to use.
That is a solid number.
Yeah, we went back. Now, if you went with another vendor, it may increase it fourfold. But that number seemed to be a solid number.
Solid from August
Yeah.
timeframe,
Okay.
August, September.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are those, the radios, are those 800 megahertz?
Yeah.
Yes,
P25 phase 2?
Yeah.
should be. Yeah.
And how many radios are those gonna buy in 2024? What, 3, 4?
I think you had
it
them
was
at
4 to
4,000.
6, something like
So
that.
how much are they running now? I thought they were close to
4,000?
6.
Yeah, it depends again on the brand. I mean, some are in that 4,000 range, and depending on the other vendor, it can be in that 7,000
Well,
range.
PD here went with Kenwood.
Kenwood.
Yeah, they went with Kenwood.
Yep.
And that's been a typical choice for fire departments across the county.
So by 2028, how many do you think we're gonna be able to buy then? If the pricing
Well,
doesn't?
some of that we're gonna discuss later
Okay.
today with that unrestricted money we have.
Okay,
So that, and this is spreading out that purchase over 5 years too.
okay.
There may be some value to buy it at once and then pay up front.
There very well could be.
Yeah.
And again, even if you do go ahead and buy all the radios at one time, then from that time frame, because technology changes so fast, I would immediately continue to keep radios in a capital improvement plan. You can look ahead and say, okay, well, in 5 years or 10 years, more like 10 years, right, is the time frame to replace radios. You can say at that time, you know, whatever, 200,000, we need to budget 20,000 a year. You may not spend it all, but you have some replacement, and you know in 10 years, it's gonna come due again to replace these radios. However you do it, if you're buying them a couple each year, you can continue that trend, or you can figure out, hey, it's 120,000, we're buying them all now, but we know that we need to keep 20 to 25,000 a year into an account, so that when 10 years comes around, we don't run into the same problem again. So it's technology driven, right? Depends how quickly, you know, things change, and radios and things like that, we know it's computers, it's
So the pager
fairly
Minute or
quick.
6 has been out for
That
a
has been
while
around for a
now.
while.
Will be they upgrading that soon?
Not that I'm aware of, I don't know what the next generation pager is gonna be, but you're right, 6s have been around for a
long
few
time.
years now, yep.
So the other topic we looked at a little closer since I was.
Can I ask real quick about radios, just to kind of put on the table and make sure I understand it correctly? So the two main brands here are Motorola and Kenwood, that I feel like has been talked about for a number of months now. I feel like there was some discussion about departments going with Motorola because it better integrates in the system, and that's the more expensive one, the higher end. And maybe there was a comment that some departments had gone with Kenwood, maybe went back to Motorola. Our local Ripon Police Department has gone with Kenwood, and I've heard that they're happy with it. So I mean, but just to put on the table,
Yep,
right?
I
Isn't
think
what
that,
we're- yeah?
that as long as you're testing them before you go ahead and purchase. So I think probably the, if I remember correctly, probably what I said was, the system, I think Fond du Lac County paid to be built out as a Motorola-based system.
Yep.
At times, I'm aware of systems that are Motorola-based systems, and on the other side, there's a company called Harris, that's a competitor,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Kenwood. You know, they have their proprietary system, and then they say, well, P25, which is the standard, it's sort of like cell phones all have to be the same to talk to each other. I can use my iPhone, but I can talk to a Android, so there's that standard. Some people will argue because Motorola or whoever built the tower system out, their hardware, in other words, the radio you have, will better integrate with the system. So I'm aware of systems where people got frustrated because it's a Motorola system, someone went with a different brand of radios and said you know, we should have tested these before we bought them, and then we would have known. So my advice would be test them before you do it, because you are buying, you know, brand apple and an orange.
Yeah.
Now they can talk to each other, they're both fruit, but
Has Fond du Lac County integrated, updated to the 800 megahertz yet?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so, I think they're still in the process.
Yep.
if I remember correctly, it was a couple of years that they gave.
2025?
They gave us 5 years to switch all of our, she wanted all of our radios switched over within 5 years. But I think they do have a couple, they are working on a couple 800 megahertz channels to get them up and running, and then they'll go from there.
And we have tested the Kenwoods already here, and have had no problem with them.
Yeah.
They work great in the
Would that
building.
change with the upgrade to megahertz, what we're talking about? Could it potentially change?
You're testing it on the
Potentially,
800
yes.
system, or the?
Whatever they,
You're testing it probably on the 500
Probably, yeah.
megahertz system.
I would test them. I would, once they
How do
have a
we test
tower,
it?
so that they'll
It's not
have a
here.
tower, I'm sure they have a couple towers built out.
Yeah, we'll have to check to see if they have
Well,
any of
we can-
those
we can see
frequencies
how long-
available.
Well, how the PD is doing, because they
Yeah.
have to integrate over to Fond du Lac County
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
So,
and they've already purchased all of theirs.
yeah.
No, but the point was, if it's not upgraded,
We think there might be a couple 800 megahertz frequencies that they're using now.
Okay.
And that would be
They
the
like-
question.
yeah.
I'm trying to think of a best way to describe it. They build out like a skeleton system for testing.
And the 500 megahertz system is 10 years old now, I think. When did I leave? No, it's 13 years old. 13 years old.
But so the point here, just to kind of move on then, I guess, it would be, we need to make sure when we're testing it, it's not enough to just to have them here and test them. That actually has no bearing from what I'm hearing. What we need to do is make sure it's on the skeletal system, that is the 800. So even if we had them and tested it, that data doesn't really matter. just to be clear from what I'm hearing, we need to make sure that we're testing it on the correct megahertz system.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once they tell you, this is our infrastructure, the vendors, I'm sure, will be more than happy to give you a radio that they're gonna program up, or the PD is gonna have one if they.
But so for us to say we've already tested it, it bears no water.
I don't know if, they may have tested on like a
Okay.
skeleton system.
They may have.
I'm not
Okay.
familiar exactly.
But you can ask PD
Yeah,
about
I
that.
guess.
And I'll talk to Ben too, our radio rep,
Okay.
he'll know.
Thanks.
And the ambulance, Mitch seemed to know a lot about,
Yep.
Yeah, because they're kind of.
They have a-
yeah, he was really in tune when I talked to him. So the other topic was the turnout gear, and I know the board talked about that first year.
There's 18,000 in the budget
Yeah.
for turnout gear. The idea was to buy 3 each year, so that we would continue with the 18,000.
So we talked internally based on your inventory, and this would be something that I think as you want to have the chiefs look at, so that the life expectancy is 10 years on turnout gear. So you have, I believe it's 5 or 6 sets that are over 10 years old right now. So you may be able to extend, and that's the resulting in the $48,000 number. That's where that's coming from.
Yep.
You may be able to extend a couple of those sets, but we hadn't looked at exactly what the condition of that equipment was.
So yeah, that's the anomaly where it goes from 48 to 0 to 6,
Yeah.
is because Heather and I physically looked at every set of gear that you have out in the lockers, who was wearing them, so we took down the name, the manufacturer date on them, and it just so happened that in 2024, there was about 7 or 8 firefighters that their 10 years are either over now or will be in 24. Then it just so happened in 25, looking through the staff that's here, everybody's gear would be compliant. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't say, hey, let's stick, whatever, 3 sets aside or the amount for 3 sets, because you never know, some gear sometimes gets damaged or whatever, but literally that number is based on how many people need gear. So in 26, I think it's 1, maybe 2. In 27, it's about 6, and in 28, it's about 5. So at some point, you want it to level off, so it's always not, 100,000 here, and then next year it's 0 or 6. You want to get to a point where you get into a rotation and say, hey, every year we're gonna buy a set of 5. And then you have that same, for the most part, right, except for increasing in cost of the gear, but you want to try and figure out what that balance is so it's not so up and down every year, it's kind of the same cost. So, but to get started in that rotation, that's kind of, it's a little awkward at first, but it's just trying to catch up and making sure that the 10-year compliancy is there.
So so the number remained the same, once you assess, or someone can inspect it and say, hey, we can defer 3
Yeah.
into 25 to balance that number down once you actually have to spend the money.
Yep.
All right, any other questions on, that's the summary, the detail is in the document though. So with that, I will make the change to add this compensation
Thanks.
information.
Of Ripon.
Yep.
Can I just say one
Yep.
thing about the hose? So, and this is just me, and this again is totally up to, firefighters and the chiefs that are here now, but there's more than 3 sizes of hose. And so I moved forward in putting 5-inch, 2.5, and 1 3/4, whereas I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, is that there's 1.5 and 3-inch hose also. And so now, I didn't include that in here, now you're buying 5 different sizes of hose. So, again, not to get too technical, but 2.5 and 3-inch, they're both supply lines. The benefit of the 2.5 is that you can use it as a hand line. The 3-inch, typically you don't. So my suggestion would be to just do away with all the 3-inch. What that does is it saves the firefighters time in not having to test another size hose, and it also saves the district, hopefully in the future, not having to buy 5 different types of hose. Same thing goes with the 1 3/4 and the 1.5 inch, right? both of them a firefighter can carry, can handle. 1.75 inches, you're probably gonna get more flow, more water versus 1.5 inches, and it serves no other purpose than to have two different sizes. So my thought was to eliminate the 1.5 inches and the 3-inch hose. You don't have to replace that, but in the future, look forward and replace the 5-inch that gets connected to the hydrant, and then the 2.5 that still could get connected to a hydrant, but also used as a hand line, and same with the 1.75 inches. That's just my thought. Again, it would save on the amount of hose that you have. It would save on the time to test it, and it would just give you a better inventory of replacement down the road in the future. That's just my thought. It really wasn't discussed too much with the chiefs. I just kind of went through that thought process as we were trying to figure out how to, start replacing hose.
And the hose and the nozzles are in the budget.
Do they carry all those hoses with them?
On the rigs we do.
Yeah.
So you carry like 4 or 5 different size hoses?
Yep.
Which would give you more room for
Correct.
one or the other.
Yeah,
I
or
like
more
this.
of one
I
or
like
the
this,
other.
yeah, it's supposed to be there, yep.
What if it's so obvious that there's not a benefit really?
Mhm.
Why would we have all the different, I mean, there has to be a benefit to have some.
So
Hose lasts forever in some fire departments. So
see.
hose just sticks around so you just have to make up some point to say, okay, we're gonna do away with the old stuff and.
So when 3-inch breaks,
Yeah.
we don't replace it, we go with
Right.
2.5.
Yeah, oh, same, every fire department's got the same.
I like it.
Some people like 1.5 inches.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you're not unusual, it's just you gotta make a cut over and say, okay, when this starts, because eventually it's gonna fail. And
We had some fail
once it
already,
fails, don't buy this 3-inch, buy the 2.5 type of
Yep.
decision. Yeah.
So are we finished?
I'm good.
Okay. I need this in a electronic version so that we can continue to update the 5-year capital improvement plan. Heather or I or,
I believe we get after that too. I'll get you all the Word documents, everything. Yeah.
so I would like to entertain a motion to accept the Ripon Area Fire District Strategic Plan 2024 to 2029.
I'll move to accept.
Thank you,
With,
Jonathan.
with additions, with additions?
However you guys wanna do it.
I'll move to accept with the changes.
I can make that change.
I second it.
Compensation.
And you second it? Is there any further discussion? And next month I'll put on the first 2 goals for us to talk about. That would be the staffing of the chief and then the setting up of the committee, the health and safety committee.
Which we have to have them.
Yep. So we might as well do it. Seeing that there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you both very much for all of your help this past year.
Yeah, we're more than happy to continue to assist in any way you would like. I'm sure I can provide some back documentation for next week.
Okay, great.
Let us know.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Keep your night end soon.
All right, let's move on, because we still have a closed session to go into. The chief's report.
We'll start off with the department staff and morale. We're still holding steady. I think when we go into the closed session, I'll talk a little bit more on morale, and we'll go over some of that. Certification update, we did have a firefighter get his driver operator certification. So he is now allowed to drive the truck, operate at fire scenes. And as of right now, you guys are getting the call sheet handed out. And you'll probably notice on there, we talked about this earlier, Assist EMS is on here, how many times, 18?
Quite a bit.
Well, between that and Julie was 18 times.
So all this, the EMS, we've had to go and help them with a patient, get to and from her doctor appointments and get her back into the house. So that's where those all assisted ones come from. And if you get on the back, you can see the total calls for the month were 31. And so far, day shift, rapid response calls, mutual aid, and so forth. And then on the bottom of there is what we've done throughout the community.
John, or Chief, do you remember what the total number of calls was for 2022?
I know we talked about
It
that.
was
278.
41 that, well, mine was different than yours.
So we're only down 40.
We're
So
down- we're
we
down
caught
40.
up. December was a big,
We were down 41. Well, we were down 41 at the end of November, we're only down 40 now. At
Okay.
the end of December.
so we kind of caught up.
No, we're only caught up by one.
One, we stayed the same, basically.
No, I meant against the previous year, we're down 40. It's not like we're down 100.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I see what you're saying. Yep.
Does anybody have questions for the chief? I'm gonna, thank you,
Sure.
Chief.
Yep.
I'm gonna move on to old business. Well, we've talked about the accounting transition already with the report. Doug, you were gonna work on policies and procedures and bylaws. Have you made any headway with that?
I made a little bit, but I think it would be better if someone else on the board could work with me on it, so that we could tease this out and get it together. So Robert shared with me a Dropbox, where he put some stuff in there from other departments, so I could share that.
Okay.
And we could look over with our current bylaws.
I've
and-
written bylaws for organizations.
Right. Well, if you want to do it, that's great.
Well, I
but-
don't wanna do it.
I don't think,
I mean,
if there was
I'm willing to collaborate.
somebody else on here, on the board that would be willing to step up and, we could do this online and maybe meet together once or talk on the phone or something about it. So I would like a little bit of assistance to kind of like keep this on track.
Do you all have policies and procedures and bylaws you can help us with?
Yeah, there'll be different examples. All
Okay.
the departments have.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a bunch from Robert.
Oh, you did already?
Yeah, well, they're in a Dropbox.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think it might be good that way, but I would like someone to like go with me through it and like.
I
and
can help
just
with that.
Kind of like, this is, I think, where we ought to go that way.
Okay.
I could share the link to, if a board member wants that. I think the
Okay.
link is still good. We'll get it working if
Okay.
it's not.
Yeah, I can help with that.
You can share it with me too.
I'll do that. I think,
Great.
I think it'd be great if some of us just, then we could bring it back to the board in aggregate and then have a roadmap that way of what we're going to do, because it could be pretty much, just need maybe to be tweaked a bit if we bring it back to the board, so we don't spend hours with it.
Okay, moving on, the discussion of where to apply the Volbrecht gift. So we can go back to the money market account, and we do have a total of $54,117.38 in unrestricted donations. I want to caution the board that when we do policies and procedures, we'll be looking at a policy to have a specific percentage of the operating budget on reserve in the money market account in case we need to drop. We can't drop below a certain number, and the board needs to decide what that is. But right now, we have money left from Ruby Volbrecht, and we have a Bryvogel donation. And our 5-year capital improvement plan, which we just approved, had 24, how much was it for radios? 24,000? So you could approve tonight that we allocate 24,000 of the 54,000 of the unrestricted donations, including Ruby Volbrecht's money for radios.
Or we could postpone it until we know specifics and talk about it next time.
We could, how many radios are we down now? Our
Oh, is there
radios
an
are
urgent-
dying, they're
You're
dying.
saying there's an urgent need, we would buy them now. But even though we just had this conversation about not knowing what brand, right? We need to test them, we need to know if they're
We have not
testing.
tested the Motorola's yet. No, we have not. Ken, what do we have? But
But this is a policy decision. do we want to move some money? Do we want to take some of these unrestricted donations and assign them to purchase
You're
radios?
saying that we'd come back still
Yep,
to.
Yeah, we would
to
come back
approve
and
it,
decide
to buy the
which
radio.
brands.
Today is just the approval to move the money
yep.
Right.
for the future when we would use the money.
Right,
Yeah.
we're not you're not gonna buy the radios tonight.
Right,
We're gonna buy them in the future, but we'll have the money set, ready to go.
but then
You're
we have,
restricting the money.
we're just
We're
restricting
restricting
the
it,
money.
exactly.
So I would move it over to the restricted, it would be restricted donations for radios. Because we don't have the money in the budget to purchase radios.
If we get a grant, we can move it back.
Yep. But we're gonna need radios sometime this year, and you wanted to talk about designating the Ruby Walbrecht money. You don't have to do it tonight, I can bring it back.
I said, go
I
ahead.
think whatever brand we get,
It's gonna
we're
cost,
still gonna use some of that money.
it's still gonna cost money.
At
We're
some
still
point.
gonna use it.
Well, it's nice to know from a budgeting standpoint where we're at. If we have $24,000 set aside for radios, we have it set aside for radios. Whether you do it tonight or you do it in the future, that's your decision.
I move we take, is it 24?
How much was it, Ellen?
24,000 is what they're recommending for us to spend on radios this year.
No, isn't it how much the gift is? Is that what the point is? So isn't this about the Walbert gift? Don't we have, are we moving on that amount?
No, we're moving just from the unrestricted amount.
And
So-
we would move Ruby.
The action item is the Walbert gift.
Right, and we would move her
We'd move
money.
all of that,
We would
plus-
assign $24,000 of unrestricted donations, including Ruby Volbrecht for radios.
Okay.
Because that's a pretty significant donation on her part.
So I would move that we take the Ruby Volberg donation of $5,975.24, plus the remainder from the total unrestricted to a total of 24,000, and move that into the equipment expense account. Is that accurate? I'm assuming it, because it has its own number.
Is that where we do radios, is out of small equipment?
Yes.
Okay,
58,100?
58,100, okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Barry. I'm going to do a roll call vote on this.
This-
Discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So now we moved it into small equipment.
Mhm.
So what if they decide, we blow out an alternator or the pump or something? Can they use that on that, or, it's gonna be designated as for radios?
Well, it's
And we
gonna be
have-
designated for for equipment.
Small
Whatever-
equipment.
Whatever comes out of equipment.
But this is be for radios, this would be a restricted for radios.
You're restricting it from me. All right, that's what I wanted to know.
That wasn't actually in the motion.
That wasn't in the motion,
Would you be interested in putting that in your motion?
yeah. So, what do you think your limit is gonna be that you're gonna set for, like, the amount that we can use out of unrestricted and keep some for operating?
I should be able to bring that to the board next. It's gonna be part of policies and procedures, and I'm hoping next month to bring that forward. I'm thinking maybe 15 to 20% of the annual budget should be restricted in the money market account for operations, just in case something happens.
Now, how much, Ellen, did you say?
15 to 20%, I would kind of like to figure out what best practice is. Plus, remember, this is the balance at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year. This is, we still have, how much, $600,000 coming in for our budget. We don't have any money yet in for our budget for 2024.
Yeah, I'll take that, that's fine.
Okay. So it's restricted for radios. And then if something else happens and they blow over budget, they'll come back to the board to ask for the money.
You need
I
to-
just hate to see it.
You need to get approval from that second.
We might have to do it anyway, but, so.
Is that okay?
No, I didn't second it, right
No,
here.
that's fine.
I figured it was, but you know, we can't be telepathic in these meetings. You don't think so?
What am I thinking right now?
I know what you're thinking right now. Is there any further discussion?
So just a reminder, so we do not need, it doesn't need to be an action item to move unrestricted budget, correct?
It is an action item, yeah.
Yep.
It says, where is it, an action item?
The action item just specifically said Volbrek gift.
Mhm.
But we're
Does it-
changing we're also putting unrestricted with that.
Mhm.
So we don't need to, so my question was, we can change it unrestricted and we can designate that without having that be an action item?
It is an action
No, it's
item.
any money has to be an action item. Any
So we're-
time
And so again,
we
my
move
question
money,
goes
it
to
has
where
be
is
an
that?
action
So to
item.
Jolene's comment, I'd agree, actually, in the reading of that we should only be moving 5,000.
Let's move the 5,000 and at the next meeting we'll move the balance.
I don't mean to be, but am I reading that correctly?
Well, we have an attorney here.
It's.
Ruby
limited to
Ballbrick?
the Ballbrick
Okay.
gift is what it's-
So we'll move change your motion.
Yeah, I
Let's-
move to change to, I don't know, amend my motion that we just move $5,975.24 for the Ruby Volbrecht donation to a restricted line for radios and equipment.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute, you
You
didn't
weren't the person, you weren't the second.
Barry seconded it.
Oh, no, I did.
forgot.
No, I misunderstood. He was changing the amendment.
You got me.
And I heard Ellen say, was that all right? And I was responding to what he said.
It's okay, I get thrown under the bus a lot.
Yeah, no, it was me, I misunderstood.
Okay,
Oh, well.
all right, so I don't need a roll call vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. And I will come in with the balance in February. Thank you very much.
And where it's coming from.
Yeah. Okay, there is no new business. Future agenda items I have that we will talk about strategic plan, short-term goals 1 and 2. We will do a report on state inspection is coming in on the 9th. And Heather's gonna take care of that. We should have a fairly good idea if we passed muster. And,
I just had a question that might be a future agenda item that maybe I would bring up, but I don't know what the closed session is, so I'll withhold.
okay, okay. So we can adjourn to closed session, I believe. Do I do a roll call vote for that?
Need a motion.
To move to
You need a
close?
motion
Closed session.
I
second.
move to adjourn to closed session.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify, well,
You need a roll call?
Vanderbrink? He just said we did.
Oh.
I trust him.
Can I make a comment? Does this whole state statute have to be, I mean, that's gotta be in the motion though.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, that's,
Does the whole statement have to be in the motion?
You normally would cite what statute sections you're going into, reasons you're going into the motion, and you're gonna want it for your minutes.
Okay.
As well as why you make the
Pursuant,
motion that
it's
way.
pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985 sub 1 sub C.
For the purpose of, and then you've got your two categories, whether you
Okay.
formally state that now or it's gonna be in your minutes, it's understood that that's what you're moving when you do that. Normally is why you'll see it in meetings that somebody said, I'll move to go into closed session as noticed, the minutes are gonna read what this
Okay.
says. Okay.
I move to go to closed session as noticed.
Okay. Got that, Doug?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call. Vanderbrink?
Yes.
Page?
Yes.
Schatzinger?
Yes.
Gatsky?
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Iverson.
Yes.
Sorensen, yes. Okay. You get 2 minutes, 3 minutes to go to the bathroom, and then we'll do our thing. I don't know that we're